We have done that to a very large extent. We're quite proud of the progress we have made. But this is the point where we are now, where we begin to translate those reforms into results.
Nigeria has done some very painful reforms in the last few years, and I think there's been a general understanding that they've been successful. When will we know that Nigeria has moved from stabilisation to growth?
If you think about where we started about 3 years ago, it was a situation where there was a lot of economic distortion, particularly coming from fuel subsidy, FX subsidy, and a lot of other market distortions. To be able to deal with that, you would necessarily have to get a situation of volatility. You remove subsidy, fuel prices will go up. Transportation is affected. Logistics is affected. Price pressure, inflation, right? So those things would happen. And those are the short-term pains that we needed to go through. And then after that was the stability. Now we've had that economic stability. We've seen moderation in inflation until recently, no thanks to Iran war. We've seen the foreign exchange rate stabilize and, in fact, steady appreciation over the past couple of years. We've also seen growth, modest growth, but increasing. So we believe that we are now at a point where we're moving from stability to growth. To be able to get to real growth, we need to unlock some factors. One of it is to do with power, infrastructure more broadly. You need skills. You need to deal with issues around overregulation. Your tax system must be investor-friendly and growth-promoting. We have done that to a very large extent. We're quite proud of the progress we have made. But this is the point where we are now, where we begin to translate those reforms into results.
One of the problems is that Nigeria's political economy still has some very large tax evaders who are almost too powerful to touch. So how do we make them pay more under your new system?
No one should be above the law. And you will see from the reform that there's the upsetting of the rules in terms of the balance of power. Nobody would have thought that it was possible to take on the multinationals. It was possible to take on the special economic zone, free trade zone operators. It was possible to take on government agencies, take on the high net worth individuals. We did all of that already. And what we're doing now is not to rely on the system where people want to comply. It's to build a system where you have to comply or there'll be consequences. So we have introduced fiscalization. Registration of taxpayers before our reform was under 10 million nationwide. Today it's over 100 million because we changed the rules. We register you even when you haven't applied if you met certain conditions. We're targeting a tax to GDP ratio of not less than 18% over the next 3 years. We're already exceeding those targets as of today.
Sometimes domestic economic actors think it's unfair because they can't compete with what happens in the special economic zones. Are you responding to that?
Let's clarify the rules. You operate in the special zone, you can compete with the rest of the world. Export your goods, right? If you must bring it to the domestic market, please comply with the rules applicable to the domestic operators, including paying taxes. That's what fairness looks like. If you create a level playing field, you are on your path towards sustainable development. If you don't, you will kill the investment in the domestic market and promote the investment in the special economic zone, but you lose job, you lose credibility, you lose taxes. And at the end of the day, everybody loses, maybe other than the guys who are benefiting from the tax exemptions. So that's something we've taken on. We've given a short window until 2028 for transition up to 25% of sales into the domestic market. After which, anything you sell to the domestic market, you pay all the taxes that the domestic operators are paying. So broadly, in the tax reforms, we have been very intentional about creating a level playing field. We've reviewed all our incentives, pioneer status, waivers. We have now introduced the national single window so that when you're bringing anything to Nigeria or taking anything out of Nigeria, you have this, you get waivers and you don't have to know who the minister is. That is how a good system should operate.
The Naira reform restored price discovery in Nigeria and confidence. What is the role of the finance ministry in helping to maintain FX confidence?
The monetary authorities cannot do their work effectively without the fiscal authorities also coming to the table. It's almost like saying you can't clap with one hand, right? You need the two hands to clap. We believe that the direction of travel from the fiscal side and from the monetary side, working collaboratively is the right way to go. As of today, Nigeria's purchasing power parity GDP is more than twice the largest economy in Africa, which is South Africa. And you can see the steady appreciation in the Naira over the past 1 year plus. From the fiscal side, it hasn't been easy, but we're clear about the focus. We had moved from an era just a few years ago where we're printing money to finance budget deficits, to a point now where we're no longer printing money to finance budget deficits. At the same time, because we're fighting inflation, the rate at which government borrowed had literally increased by almost threefold, from about 8% to 24% until recently that is beginning to moderate. So there has been more pressure around deficit financing and the cost of debts. We are not printing money to spend. Tax revenue mobilization will not happen overnight. It's taking longer time.
The amount of borrowing, just I think in the last 6 months, it's really ticked up. What's the direction of travel?
A lot of the borrowing is refinancing. Yeah, so if you refinance, it's not new debt, literally. There's also the bit about the ways and means. That is the monetization of deficits in the past, which were securitized. This was just debt that was not counted before, that are now being reported in line with transparency. And you also have a significant part of national debt in local currency, which was just due to revaluation. Overall, if you look at the debt to GDP ratio, we're under 50%. So for us, the focus is more around the cost of debt. What is the debt service, cost of debt service to revenue ratio on one hand? And number two, or maybe even more importantly, is the application of those, borrowing. We're developing a concept of net financial position. What that means is for every dollar you borrow, it gives you value of more than $1. Then you can borrow as much as you want. So we're not worried about the level of debt. We do have short-term concerns around how much it's costing us to service the debt, partly due to what the monetary authorities are doing to fight inflation, which we understand, but we see that as a short-term problem rather than a long-term issue.
There's a real desire, I think, to not just stabilize, but industrialize in Nigeria. How do we avoid creating a new generation of rent seekers? How do we keep focused on productive industrializers like Dangote, like Bua?
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance. Protection is a form of tax on the people. But if you do that for a short period of time with a clear roadmap as to how you get to a point where you can be competitive without protection, then that's okay. If you have to protect for 10 years, 20 years, it doesn't make sense. Maybe you shouldn't even be doing that at all. So these are the things we are working through as we speak. In fact, we just released our fiscal policy measures for 2026 a couple of weeks back, and we are now reducing the tariffs and the levies on importation of a number of items, from rice to vehicles, because we said to ourselves, you can't protect forever. If you protect to build local capacity, that makes sense. But there has to be a timeline so that all the stakeholders are clear. If I'm the private sector person and you impose a 60% levy so I can produce locally, I have no incentive to be competitive. I have no incentive to promote efficiency. So we have to moderate that. That is exactly what we're doing. We're currently developing a framework to provide clarity to the private sector. If we have a levy imposed, by the way, the African Continental Free Trade Area limits our ability to even do those things indiscriminately. The 3% we have where we can apply protection locally are the areas where we believe that we need to do carefully, either because you're trying to protect local jobs, you're developing skills, or maybe you are not currently competitive because of circumstances that are domestic to your country.
Is this the beginning of a new chapter in Nigeria's political history as well?
Absolutely. You know, democracy is about representation. Representation for those of us who have the opportunity to serve. It's called public service. You have a duty to be accountable to the people. And like demand and supply, whatever is demanded is supplied. If people have to pay the right amount of tax that is fair, particularly for the middle class and the upper class, they're going to demand accountability. And those in power will have no choice but to provide the accountability. And then society is better off as a result of that.
You're heading into a volatile election period. Let's assume this administration wins. What for you are going to be the priorities?
It's to deepen the reforms. One of the reasons why Mr. President said, I know where you should go next, go to Ministry of Finance, is because he wants us to do bigger reforms around the fiscal space, both in terms of not just how we raise revenue, but how we spend our money, how we finance deficits, and even how you deal with issues around subsidies. Do you want to do conditional transfers? How do you look after the vulnerable people? How do you ensure that you don't leave anyone behind? Reducing inequality. Mr. President has priority for transformative projects. And some of that you already know, from rail to ports to coastal roads and everything in between. But beyond that, it's also the whole philosophy that we do not have sufficient capital in the public sector to finance our development. So all of this is what we are working on